Good evening, my loves. Welcome to Misfit Ministries. So, we are in part 3 on addiction. Today, we are covering giving grace to addicts because in our previous topics, we were talking about how, a lot of people have done some things that they are not really proud of. We also don't know their stories. So, we as humans who are not perfect need to show people grace, especially when people are in active addiction. We need to show them grace. We need to show them grace when they're out of active addiction. All right, and here's why. We do not know their story. Not anybody is just like, oh, I want to go do crack today. Let me go do that. Nobody just decides that 9 times out of 10. I can't say nobody because, hey, somebody might have. But people don't just wake up one day and choose to be an addict, is the point I'm trying to make. They don't just wake up and want this addiction. They don't wake up and want to crave these things. So we need to show them grace because who knows? The doctor could have put them on pain medication. Somebody could have slipped them something. They could have been going through a hard time. For all we know, their addiction could stem from childhood trauma because their parents could have been addicts and it could have been around. And little do you guys know, sometimes parents that are addicts will put that addiction on their child. So there's people that are literally fighting demons that are not even theirs, trying to break generational curses. And honestly, how would you feel? How would you feel if you were like really messed up, you were depressed, say you were getting divorced, everything was falling apart, and then all of a sudden you became an alcoholic or became a drug addict? And then people were mocking you and recording you and making your situation worse. You're probably gonna feel like shit. So let's not do that, okay? So if you see somebody who's struggling, I'm not saying go give them money and let them in your house, because obviously people do some out of pocket things sometimes when they're in addiction. But what you can do is give them resources, give them food, make sure they're not harming themselves. And I know this is gonna sound crazy and people might get mad at me for this, but if people have a certain type of drug and there's a way to get them free syringes or whatever, do that. If you have access to Narcan, get Narcan. There's so many things that you can do if you have an active addict in your life to help them. And the biggest thing is Narcan. Find out where Narcan is available to you. If you can get Narcan. Because you could be walking down the street one day, you could be on Walmart and somebody could be overdosing. You have no idea. It could be an accidental overdose. So I don't know. I'm just saying, show people some grace. All right. And cause and effect in this is a lot of people be going through stuff, and that is effects. Some of us run to food. Some of us run to alcohol. Some of us run to other things. Some people try it once and they're like, oh, it's never going to get me. And it does. Cause and effect. So another thing is they also mourn themselves. I don't think you guys realize this. I've dated active addicts, and I will honestly say that they have sat there and told me like they miss who they were. They miss who they were before the addiction. And along the timeline, somewhere in it, they got messed up. Somewhere along the timeline, something happened, traumatizing, and it made them go to their drug of choice. So it's not always just, oh, they're a drug addict. But anyways, they have feelings. That's super important. They are still human, even though they're in active addiction. They absolutely have feelings, just like you have feelings. They get embarrassed. They want clean clothes. They want to be clean. And you know what's crazy is not all active addicts are homeless. There's some active addicts that are actually very, well off, and they're actually able to do it. They're called functional addicts. So not everybody looks like an addict. As a matter of fact, a CEO could be an addict and you would never know it. But guess what? You're like, oh, he's the best guy in the world because he doesn't fit the description of an addict, which is another reason, show people grace. Show them grace. You don't know what they're going through. You could be sitting in church next to somebody who's holier than thou, and meanwhile, when they leave church, they have an addiction problem and nobody knows, and then going and preaching the Bible. So yeah, don't do that. Show people grace. And a big thing is recovery is possible. I know I keep looking to the side. That's because my notebook is here. But recovery is possible. I have a lot of friends in recovery. I have seen a lot of people be sober for 10, 20 years. I've seen people doing amazing. So recovery is possible. And them demons are really hard to fight. They really are. But you can fight them. And I have faith in you. And I believe you can do it. And I absolutely know you can do it. And the biggest thing in the world that I have to say is when showing people grace, if you want people to go to church, you want people to believe in God, you want people to look at God, stop telling these people that God hates them. God tells people to come as you are. I would bring you to church with me. It doesn't matter if you're an active addict. It doesn't matter what you're going through. I would bring you to church with me. And the best thing about it is church is where three or more, or actually I think it's one or more. I don't know. I'd have to read it. Don't quote me on that part because I'm just excited. But where he says where his name is spoke and one or more gather, that is church. So you can have church without going into a building. I do advocate there are some really great churches out there, but I will say nobody is perfect. Your phone addiction is just as bad as someone's drug addiction. Your social media addiction is just as bad as someone's drug addiction. If you have to freak out because you need Starbucks in the morning and you can't start your day, that is an addiction. If you are freaking out because your phone isn't in your vicinity, that is an addiction. I have an addiction to my phone. I always panic when it's not around me. Why? Because bad things happen when my phone's not around. So, initial trigger, I keep my phone on me at all times. It's always dying 9 times out of 10. But yeah, so make sure you show people grace. If you want people to believe in God, show them you're not perfect. I'm not perfect. I'm far from perfect. But stop telling these people God hates them. God does not hate them. You guys got to remember people have a choice and free will, right? And how it was put to me one day is, say you have 2 children, right? And you're in the place of God. One of your children is an addict and one of your children is a star child. You love both of your children, right? So you're not, and say somebody was like, you need to pick a child to unalive. Would you be able to pick one of your children to unalive? You wouldn't, right? You would show them grace. You would show them mercy. The devil is very real. The devil is very, very well alive. And guess what? He attacks people. Everybody has free will. Everybody is quick to say God doesn't exist. Everybody is quick to say, oh, well, if God was real, why is this happening? If God was real, why do I have an addiction? Baby, the devil is real too. And the devil will come at you in many different ways, many different forms, family, friends, otherwise. You have to have discernment. You need to listen to God. You have to have focus on God. And I know it's not easy because trust me, I fall short all the time. And I'm not one to push my religion down anybody's throat. But you don't lead people to God by sitting there being a hypocrite. You don't lead people to God by being judgmental. You don't lead people to God by telling them God hates them. You remind them they are loved, they are worthy, and they are worth it. Because if they're in active addiction, they're at their lowest. And this is the moment that they need to know they're loved. They need to know they're important. They need to know that they have essence in this world. And that's what you need to remind them. Because realistically, if they didn't have some type of depression and they weren't fighting demons, they'd probably be in a different situation. So please show grace. People are fighting for their lives. I love you guys so big, and stay tuned. This is Miss Fish Ministries, and if you didn't know my name, again, I'm Erica. I love you guys.